I think we could do hoverboards, and I think it could do well. Sure enough, in 10 weeks, we ended up doing $38 million online. Nobody's going to be worse than how I was, where I was extremely demanding. I expected nothing but the best, a lot of detailed in reporting. I would push the envelope with everybody. When someone told me they couldn't do something, no.
How do you select people for your team, knowing that this is the standard and this is how you operate?
I'm driving on a highway at 200 miles an hour. It's pitch black, no lights on. And when I turn left, you're going to need to turn left with me.
Do you ever see yourself not being on top of client work, meaning client communication or account management?
I took one approach at one time. I was going to say, I was just going to grow at all costs, and it led to chaos. In 2 to 3 years from now, it's just going to be all about strategy more than anything else in the world.
Things always go to some point or another.
Always.
You inevitably
always,
make mistakes.
every day.
Well, Joshua, it's great to meet you today. Joshua is the founder and CEO of AMB, a Klaviyo Elite Partner agency that helps e-commerce businesses grow their revenue and customer loyalty through powerful email and SMS marketing. With, I believe, over 9 years of digital marketing experience, Joshua worked with some of the largest apparel brands in the world, launching viral campaigns and generating millions in sales. Joshua is also a sought-after speaker at the industry events and is known for his cutting-edge insights and passion for empowering e-commerce entrepreneurs. Joshua, welcome to the Big Growth Show.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Awesome. So that was my intro. I'd love to take and to hear, I guess, your version of it. And maybe we can start with a background and how you got into the agency, into marketing space in the first place, and then perhaps we'll develop from there.
Absolutely. So I had a pretty unique journey landing where I am today in 2025. So I actually started out as an accountant for 10 years out of my life before even finding out what marketing was and the importance of it. So I was a public accountant for several years, and then one of the clients that I worked with was in the apparel space. So I actually joined to be the controller of that place that I was going to work for. And one of the things when I was speaking to him, I said, I really don't love accounting. And he said, listen, when you come here, you're going to get your world open to a whole new thing. So he really wasn't into e-commerce either. But one of the things that we found out when I joined in 2014, as we're heading into the summer of 2015, he found out that one of the next big things was going to be hoverboards. So, we grouped together and he said, listen, I think we could do hoverboards, and I think it could do well. Well, sure enough, in 10 weeks, we ended up doing $38 million online. And it was the most unbelievable thing. On Cyber Monday, we did Shopify's highest day ever at that time, which was 5.5 million. And it was just an incredible success that we didn't even know what we were doing. We actually worked with an agency that did a really great job for us in Google AdWords. We were SEO one, and it was really great. So from there, went to the CEO of the company in that January, and I said, hey, remember I told you I didn't love accounting? Really want to get into marketing, because it was a blend of data, which was the math part that I loved, but it also gave me the art part of thinking through different strategies and different things. So from there, he agreed that we should obviously dive more into e-commerce after a successful 2015 with Hoverboard. So we started launching a bunch of different products. So from fidget spinners, light up sneakers. We also failed with a lot of different products, whether it was drones, GoPro knockoffs, and a myriad of different things. So we really learned a lot of different things. But one of the things that we did was the company where I was working, we purchased a company called Jack Threads, and we inherited a 16 million person email list. And we were really excited. We were like, wow, this is going to be great. And that's where I learned every deliverability problem you can have under the sun trying to manage 16 million email contacts. So, we were batching and blasting. We were, trying to send an email every single day. And what started happening was we weren't seeing the returns that we were seeing very early on. And that's when we started figuring out what Google Postmaster was back in 2017. And all these things that people are now first using today for the very first time, been dealing with for so long. So we were at a point where we had to only send emails to people that had clicked an email in the last 7 days, because otherwise it would never inbox. So from there, learned a lot about email marketing and retention. So trying to figure out if person buys a t-shirt, what's the product they're most likely to buy next? How do we cross-sell them? How do we upsell them into different things and help grow that lifetime value of the customer? So went on and did a few other projects, but I always knew I wanted to own my own business. The one thing that I knew as an accountant, that I really didn't want to own inventory, because I saw the life cycle of what that inventory looked like. So that's where I went out and started my own agency. And I really loved the email aspect of the business, because it was so thoughtful, so much data that went into the thought process of who we're segmenting to, who's engaged, who's really not engaged, and the different strategies that we need to think about. So that's what really led me to wanting to launch my own agency and then give my knowledge to the brands that I work with.
It feels like your accounting mind helped you to approach the agency model and I guess the overall marketing business with a more structured and I guess data driven approach. Would you say that is true?
Yeah, I think that's really fair to say.
Mm.
So, one of the things that we're always thinking about is two things. We're thinking about profitability and we're thinking about cash flow. In today's world, this isn't 2018, 2019, where there's a bunch of VCs just funding businesses. That really doesn't exist anymore unless you're profitable today. So, our whole goal is, how do we make you as a business more profitable, faster, and quicker? So, there's a few different things that we're trying to think through different strategies. So, as we're thinking about like the welcome flow, if someone signed up and it's gone 14 days and the person hasn't converted, is it worth giving an extra 5% discount than spending that money on Meta? Those things are different strategies that we're trying to work through. We're also want to work with you with your inventory. So, it's great to have an inventory asset, but if it's not moving and it's dead stock, it's actually
Mm.
hurting your cash flow. So how do we take that inventory asset and make you more cash flow positive? Although it may hurt your bottom line a little bit, it's no good just sitting there and collecting dust. And you're paying storage costs in your 3PL and different areas. So we really want to be mindful of all those different things, and how do we help produce cash flow. And probably the most important thing, I think, for any retention agency or email agency, whatever the new buzzword of the day is, I can't keep up anymore with what people want to call us. It's extremely annoying. We really want to think about, how do we get the customer from purchase one to purchase two? That's got to be the most important job of pretty much any agency. Yes, it's great when we can help close that first purchase, but we are only as good as the traffic being driven to us by the paid media agencies that are driving that traffic. So my whole goal is, how do we help support the wonderful paid agencies that we work with and really, close the gap and also get that person to the second purchase? We know the more that you grow the person's lifetime value, the more money this brand now can go spend top of funnel, which at the end of the day is going to help your retention marketing.
Mm. I'm actually curious from a marketing background myself, partially. Before we dive into operations in sort of agency business itself, given the fact that you can't really control paid media agencies, and whoever is on the customer acquisition side of things, how do you help maybe your clients? How do you help brands, help themselves when it comes to customer acquisition? Because obviously, as an agency, you just kind of sometimes fall into a partnership with someone who's already having customer acquisition agency in place, but perhaps they're not performing as well, or maybe they just not aware of how retention marketing or full sort of lifecycle marketing works. How do you go about maybe education? How do you navigate this sort of space where you kind of need to communicate to the client and to the agency about what you find, with data and your analysis?
So what I try to start doing, and it's not perfect because every
Mm.
client tries to treat it different, is we actually like to try and have a relationship with the paid marketing agency that's running the account in conjunction with the client. We want to know what creative is working, what landing pages are working, what are they seeing? Is click-through rate on certain messaging working well for them. Well, how are we following up with that with retention marketing? So if we're saying one thing in our emails and they're saying different things in the ads, well, it now is a very disjoint experience for the customer. That is it the paid media agency's fault? Is it our
Mhm.
fault? How do we work together? What are they using that's working well? Also, vice versa, what messaging that are we seeing that is working well? Where are we seeing, where should we be driving them on the website? Are we seeing bounce rates? What is time on site? We need to understand all these things together with the paid media agency. And yeah, sometimes it's a little ugly in the relationship where, they think we're placing blame. But at the end of the day, my whole thought process is sales cures all.
Mm.
And that's all the client cares about. So we're trying to get revenue in the door. And, we're not trying to force anything with the
Mm.
paid media agency. All we can do is like say, hey, here's the data that we're seeing and go from there.
Got it. Got it. Perhaps this is a good gateway into the inside of your agency business. Let's start with the time when you launched the agency business, and it's been a while ago, I guess. What was your vision for the business? How did you see the world of the agency business in the first place, and how perhaps it's changed
Yeah.
with the time? Yeah.
I thought I was going to be a full service agency. I really
Mm.
thought I was going to do it all. When I was in house, I ran Meta, I ran AdWords. TikTok really didn't exist. I was trying Pinterest and things of that nature. So I really thought I was going to run a full service agency, web development from start to finish. And what I quickly realized was that wasn't the right approach. And we really thought it was better to niche down into the email and SMS and into the retention space. I had thoughts that I was going to want to grow my agency to 50 to 100 employees and make it this really huge agency. And what I really prefer now is working more closely with the clients that we're working with, and being a little more selective with the clients that we choose and deep diving into a more long-term relationship. Being an accountant, you think about 15, 20, 30-year relationships. Generally, people don't just switch accountants. We have
Mm.
so much information about you. We know about your kids, your parents, if you have grandkids. We know every aspect of your business. We try to take the same approach with the clients that we're working with, and we try to think about our relationship, and we want to have 15, 20-year relationships. If a client wants to text me over the weekend or call me, they should feel free to and not have an issue. And, as long as I like working with the client, that's the most important thing.
How do you go about structuring this type of relationship with clients? And obviously, different agencies and different agency founding teams or leadership teams, they have their own preference in how they approach account management or client relationship. You seem to be quite open. Do you set any boundaries? Because this is what we experience with our clients, with our agency clients, is that sometimes that I guess they've got this general approach to having an open door, and whether it's Slack or WhatsApp or email, but a lot of times they do not set the boundaries needed to have this more professional level of relationship. How do you go about it? How do you establish that? Or do you establish it in the first place?
Yeah, I think a lot about how I was when I was in house, and I was an agency's worst nightmare. If I was my own client, I would fire myself. I was truly a nightmare. I was the person that would say, this isn't moving, this isn't working. I got excess inventory here. I would start running sales, this, that, and the other. And one thing I hated was AdWords. I hated it. I could run it, but I did not like it. So I would work with agencies because I didn't want to deal with the shopping feeds and Merchant Center. I just didn't enjoy it. And this is way before Performance Max, and you were bidding on every little keyword. So I would start running a sale, and I would call the agency and I said, hey, we're going to run a sale. And they said, all right, when is it starting? And I would say 30 minutes ago. Like that is a nightmare of a client. So I always look at it as nobody's going to be worse than how I was, where I was extremely demanding. I expected nothing but the best, a lot of detailed in reporting. I would push the envelope with everybody. When someone told me they couldn't do something, no, if I want to land a helicopter in the middle of my room right now, let's figure out how to do it. And that, I think, has to be the approach with who you're working with. So I really don't have much of a boundary. Now, with the team, obviously I need them to have boundaries, because what I allow and what I expect is one thing. Obviously, I don't expect my team to adhere to how I am, but I want the clients to feel that there is no boundaries to an extent. And they also know, with working with me, I tell them, if I can respond, I will respond. If I cannot respond, I will let you know, and I will get back to you as soon as we can. For the most part, unless it's an extreme emergency, my response to most clients is, we're not going into open heart surgery. Nobody's dying. If I can't respond for 12 hours, then that's what it's going to be. But they know, for the most part, that when they need me, I'm there for them. I had a client call me last night at 8:30 at night. And I have no problem picking up the phone, because we've established such a great relationship with our clients. I don't mind talking to them. I'm invested in their business just as much as they are.
Mm.
So that's where we have that great retention.
Do you ever see yourself not being on top of client work? I mean, client communication or account management? Do you ever see yourself being completely out of, let's say, client
I know a
relation?
lot of great question. A lot of CEO and founders, like, I think they probably look at what I do and say, that's crazy. How can you manage a business? And, maybe they're right. They can have their own way, but I think that's why I think I enjoy it too much. And I'm so driven that that's why we're really selective with who we work with and the brands that we work with. We just don't say yes to everybody. As much as we're getting vetted, we are also vetting the company that we work with. Are they spending money top of funnel? Did that all of a sudden drop? What trends are we seeing inside, you know, all of their accounts? Those are all things that we need to think about and look into. And really, the most important thing is, can I talk to you? Can we have a normal relationship? We are really direct with our relationship. We say the good, the bad, and the ugly. When we make a mistake, you'll hear it from us before anything else. When we're doing well, you'll hear that from us as well. So, that's where clients appreciate that candor, that directness. So I don't know if I will ever get out of being a working CEO.
Mm.
I try, but I think that's where we just go a little more narrow, where we don't need to work with hundreds of clients, and we can just
Mm.
be very select.
I see why Adam Kitchen recommended us to connect and jump on the call. One thing that I see that differentiates quote unquote high performance agencies or high performance teams and average, below average, whatever, is the ability to translate excellence or high standards into actionable points or behavior. What we've seen so far is that there are a lot of teams, and I'm not just referring to the agency space itself, teams and businesses that, or founders that say that they value high standards or they value high quality of work, but it's all in their mind or it's all somewhere on a Google Doc. That value never gets to be translated into actual behaviors or into actual processes. The question is, how do you do it? How do you translate what you see as a high standard of work or excellence into, hey, actual client results, client communication, and so on and so forth?
Yeah. I'd probably say that probably the biggest thing that we had to change into was having a project manager in house, where they're ensuring the execution of everything that is happening across the account managers, the copywriters, the designers. And that really made a huge difference in the business for us, because it just kept things moving, because we do try to work in a hyper pace. So one of the core values that we have is speed. So my methodology that was ingrained into me by the CEO that I worked for was a day was a week was a month, and a month was a year. So we work really, really fast. So in that hyper speed, though, a lot of mistakes can happen. Everyone that before they even come to work for me, I let them know. One of the key things about working with me is understand that I'm driving on a highway at 200 miles an hour. It's pitch black, no lights on. And when I turn left, you're going to need to turn left with me, and you're not going to be able to see. But no, I may turn left and find out that that left turn was a wrong turn, be ready to jump back on the highway. So, one of the key things is constant communication with the team. We have an internal reporting call every week where I look at it as I'm the client and they're giving me the news of what happened the previous week for the accounts, and I'm picking it apart before they even speak to the client. So when I mentioned that I was an agency's worst nightmare, that's what I'm putting the project managers through that work on accounts. They're going through how I used to be. So it'd be very difficult for one of our clients to be worse than what I'm putting the project managers through, because it's very in-depth reporting that we try to go through. What's the why? What are we seeing? Are we seeing the unique clicks? Are we seeing the flows continue to grow? If there's downs, what's the why? Is there traffic down? Is something broken? I don't want to miss a beat because we're month to month with our clients. My whole thought process is if you don't think we're earning your business every month, you should fire us.
So there are obviously a lot of variables to control. I used to have a marketing agency myself, so I know what it is to dissect variables into different data points and be on top of the strategy and trying to make sense of it. And then it's ever changing, and then
Mm-hmm.
things always go to shit at some point or another. You
Always,
inevitably make
always, every
mistakes.
day.
Yeah. How obviously as a founder you're this is your business, this is what we're building, and it's our future. We are personally invested into it. How do you select team members? How do you select people for your team, knowing that this is the standard and this is how you operate?
So a lot of it comes down to trust. And, thankfully, a lot of the core team at one point or another worked with me in house. I saw firsthand what they were capable of. They saw me, how I was and how I operated. And then from there, as we've added other team members, they're ingrained, the previous team that I worked with, they're ingrained with the culture of
Mm-hmm.
how I think. So as they're working with other team members, right, it's not just me alone teaching them the values that I have. They're doing the same thing the same way. Now, it's not meant for everybody, but I try to be as upfront
Mm-hmm.
about who I am before they make a move. I never knew, you know, the one lucky thing that I had when I went from the accounting company that I worked for to the fashion company was I had the books. I knew what everybody made. I knew their profitability. I saw everything. I saw the trends. Nobody has that really insight for the most part. So I try to give as much information. I try to explain the demand that sometimes I'm extremely direct, very rough, but you'll always know where you stand with me as a company. So, it's challenging, and some people think they want that, and then, they're here and it's not for them. But it's
Mm-hmm.
very, the relationship with the employees is great.
Do you have a second in command in the business?
Yeah, the project manager is, yeah. She's
Right.
pretty much the second in command.
Right. So when you're talking about trust, I've read this quote. I think it's from the book by Nassim Taleb, if I'm not mistaken. That he said that people shouldn't be making decisions if they don't have skin in the game, or something in these lines. They're not
Mhm.
personally invested, because if yeah, you shouldn't be making, you shouldn't be on top of the decision making if you're not invested personally in the game, which basically means that you have to have something to lose if you want to make strategic decisions or company decisions. First, I'm curious, what do you think about that? But also, how do you go about trusting people in the business? If, for example, even if it's not the second man in command or second person in command, if it's somebody else who's a copywriter or a designer or whoever, how do you go about trusting them to take ownership of their role when they're not perhaps personally invested in your business? They don't have a stake of the business, but perhaps they've got other motivations.
You know, I try to think about how I was as an employee.
Mm.
So there was one accounting job that I had where I would pull up to the parking lot and I was sick to my stomach before I even walked in the door, where I hated going in and it wasn't the right place for me and I had to leave. And then I think about other jobs where I still speak to the owners of the company because we had such great relationships and trust. You know, I think about myself and I know maybe I think differently, but my thought process was I would run through a brick wall to try and get things done and ensure that I was doing what was in the best interest of the business at all times, and learned from the mistakes that I made. And I saw the grace that I was treated with when I did make mistakes. Sometimes not so much, right? Where you would get scolded like anybody else. But, it wasn't that it was so like the thought process behind the mistake, like they knew I was running through that brick wall. So although you get in trouble, you knew you were secure. So I try to take that same approach and grace that was given to me, whether in accounting, whether I was the controller or in marketing. So I take that same approach with the team where I know they're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes every single day. I'm not perfect. So if I can make mistakes and forgive myself, I have to be able to forgive the team and allow them to learn from their mistakes. And one of the things that was ingrained into me early from my father was, how do you turn a negative into a positive? And that's what we try to do is, okay, here's the mistake that you made. Here's the negative. Here's how we're going to turn it around and use that as a teachable moment, sometimes just one-on-one with the employee, or sometimes I take that learning moment and teach the whole team because it's something that somebody else may accidentally do or fall into. So I try to teach everybody, hey, here's the mistake that this one person made, and it's okay. Or sometimes I just put it on myself and say that I made the mistake. And here's a teachable moment for everybody. I think just 2 weeks ago, I forgot to send out an email. you know it happens, but how do you fix that mistake? How do you talk to the client about what happened and the mistake that was made? It's really important to teach the team, and how do you defend them, and how do you talk to the client, and sometimes you have to do it on behalf of the team. All learning
Mm.
moments.
Do you often find yourself wearing a teacher's or mentor's or coach's hat in the sim?
All the time.
Yeah.
Trying to coach them, teach them. you know One of the things that I was lucky with was having this accounting background, then going through the hoverboard experience and all these other products. One time I've gone to TJ Maxx's headquarters to go sell them fidget spinners and getting butchered by a salesperson on packaging and design. And I have had so many experience negotiating with UPS contracts, traveling to China, dealing with de minimis and all these other things. So, I have such a unique background that when I work with companies, it really generally turns into very long-term relationships because they realize very quickly that I've lived their life and I'm here to help them through it. I get calls from clients that have nothing to do with email. Oh, do you know anything about like this tax law? No, the answer now is no. It's been so long. I don't know the
Mm.
tax laws. They've changed too much. You got to call an accountant. Some stuff
Yeah.
believe it or not, still read here and there, but for the most part, you shouldn't. I'm dangerous, but not that good. But I dealt with all the de minimis stuff. We used to ship from. We moved our warehouse to China. It would go through Hong Kong. Everything would be master packed, and when it got to Louisville, it would it would break out and then go to the customers because we were able to fall under that $800 de minimis, and it was such a great tactic and thing. So all these things I've been through. So when a client calls me, oh my God, we're stuck at the port, we need to change email. I get it. I've been through it. No problem. We'll work with you and we'll figure it out. That email that we were going to send, it'll be ready when the product gets to the 3PL.
What I'm thinking about is that obviously there is a great influx of retention marketing agencies, whatever, Klaviyo agencies nowadays, because the bar to entry is so low that anyone can basically start an email marketing agency from their bedroom. Now, I think the one of the biggest differentiators is the ability and experience that you bring to the table. Foremost, the ability to understand your client's business contextually. And I guess a 20-year-old can't really do that because the person doesn't really have a contextual experience of building businesses or having experiences. But when you do, you actually can link the dots, not just back to the email, but back to the service, but also strategically and help client business navigate different waters. And in our experience, it's very much to do with, it's like having this interesting partnership, or this very interesting dynamic where sometimes you become a little bit of a parent, sometimes you become a little bit of a therapist, sometimes you become a little bit of this or that, and then it transcends the service. It's like it's totally something else. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, listen, I can't worry about all these agencies that continue to pop up overnight, and they're the world's biggest experts. And even when you're going just from working at an agency and then starting your own agency, which you can have a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of experience, which is great. But I don't concern myself really too much with them, just because strategically, yeah, there are some other really great players in the space that I am proud to say that I am friends with, and some people that are, I think, smarter than I am. But where I think we just are very different is that ability to roll up our sleeves and willing to speak with you and tackle almost any project. I had a client the other day say, hey, they were talking about packaging design for, they're thinking about going into wholesale. And I said, no, I've been through this. Come on, we're going to work through it. And we just helped them design the packaging. We ended up doing the design work because I just wanted to see them win, where, I don't think many retention agencies are going through it with their clients at that level.
Do you ever question this kind of decisions? Because obviously, it's out of scope, generally speaking. Do you
No,
question the decision from P&L perspective?
no, I don't question anything.
Yeah,
I just go, and if
yeah.
it's something that's going to be, a lot of time, energy, and effort, yeah, I'll have that upfront conversation with the client and say, yes, we need, we can help, but this is something we're going to have to charge for because it's going to take X amount of hours and time. But I don't. Again, we're not in the nickel and diming game because we're thinking about the long-term relationship of our client. How do we, some clients have been here for a couple of years. Just tells you the story where, they're comfortable, they know. So even if we did make a mistake, they know where our head is and they know where our heart's at. So, and generally we're telling them not telling us.
I just want to go back quickly to the operations and project management as a responsibility. Do you get involved in team management as much, or does your second in command responsible for team management?
I would say for the most part, I try to stay out of it as much as possible. I try to, trust the team that they know when to get things done. If things need to get moved around and shuffled, for the most part, I don't get involved. Sometimes when it's crossing different teams and different people, yes, I'll get involved and try and help set priority levels of like, okay, and if I need to call a client to move things, or if they need to call the client to move things, but generally it's that second in command. She's the one that's really, pulling the strings and making sure that everything is getting done.
How easy was it to find second in command?
So that was just a level of trust that came over time. So that person actually was an account manager
Mm,
at one point. Wasn't really the right role for that individual, but I knew she was special
mm,
and played a really important part of the business. So, you know, and one thing that I knew she was great at was getting things done on time.
mm.
So I just thought this could be a natural fit, and, worked out for the best.
Yeah, the reason why I ask is because a lot of times second in command are being promoted from within, especially if you're like maybe sub 3 mil revenue agency, and it's rather difficult to find somebody from without from outside, somebody who's experienced, somebody who's like great cultural fit, but also it's a kind of risky move. So a lot of times project managers or somebody like maybe from HR background or finance whatever background gets promoted to sort of a head of ops or second command. But the mistake that we see quite often is CEOs or the founders, they pick the wrong person for the responsibility. They think that possibly the person can tick the boxes in terms of project delivery or something like that, but the person isn't capable of thinking dynamically. What it means like is that the growth, especially operation growth, is very dynamic. Like you just can't you can predict and you can task manage stuff like that, but things change rapidly and you need to be very flexible and adaptable. And where the biggest miss happens is exactly in this right pick of the person. And I think it comes down to experience, I guess. You can't really, if you haven't experienced these kind of mistakes with picking the wrong type of people, you can't know what's wrong and right. I don't know if
Right.
you experienced that yourself or you had anybody else before selecting, before having your current second man in command, second person in
No,
command.
so that, I think it was just a natural progression that really
Mm,
just worked out. Got extremely lucky. I don't
mm,
think the business is where it is today without her.
mm,
So I think it was just luck. But yeah, to your point though, like I've hired the wrong person before, or maybe not I shouldn't say that. Maybe not the wrong person, but I guess maybe my thought process and values, you know, I hired a person that when I was in house, they worked at an agency. So brought that person in. I was like, oh, this person's a rock star, killer, super intelligent, really smart, smarter than me in a lot of different areas in email marketing, and even taught me things, but just wasn't the right cultural fit,
mm,
wasn't, I'm in speed and that person was not in the speed mode. I was really all about communication and upfrontness with the client, and they were a little slower than I wanted it to be. So it turned out to not be the right fit. And it was a very open conversation. I don't sugarcoat it. If I see something, you're going to know about it immediately, because it
mm,
doesn't do anybody any good to hide the feelings. If I think you're going the wrong course, I don't want you to keep going down that wrong course for another month. I want to correct it immediately. And I try to invite the same thing. If there's something that someone sees that they think I'm doing wrong, now I understand that relationship is very different. Nobody really likes to go up the ladder to say, I think you're doing this wrong. But I try to invite an area where I'm not perfect at everything. I do want to get better. I want to be more efficient, you know,
mm,
especially when you're hiring new people. You try to invite that, like, what did you learn from either other companies or other agencies that could make us 1% better? If we can get 1% better almost every day, shoot, we'll be great.
mm. So that's the 1% better. It's interesting enough. I've just been thinking about a similar concept about improvements and continuous improvement. Does that 1% better start with selecting the right people? And then, but how do you maintain that philosophy or the value within the business?
Yeah, the right people are everything here.
Mm,
And sometimes selecting the right people it's more important to select the right mind state than it is to select over intelligence.
Mm,
So I've interviewed people where they were really, really smart, but I didn't think they would fit in. Where I've hired people that maybe needed a little more training, a little more understanding, but I felt would fit in with the culture of how we work, operate, speed. And I found that to be way more important. And then my job is to continue to teach them and give them moments of clarity, growth, allow them to feel that they can ask questions when they don't know something. Or, you know, on a send, what do you think about this segmentation for this end? Because it's about A, B, and C. You think we should open it up, not open it up, reduce down? We invite down to that simple of a question because it's
mm,
important.
mm. Allowing people to speak and speak up. I guess it comes down to self-esteem and confidence. Very interesting. What do you think, in your own words, of course, what do you think sets your agency apart? Whether it's operationally or from a quality point of view, from delivery point of view, what sets your agency apart?
I think I think it's really more about strategy than
Mm,
anything else. You know, for the most part, a lot of people can design emails that are very close to each other. A lot of people can write really great copy. But I think as we're heading into 2025, that's not enough anymore. I think the strategic mindset of how we think about your customer and your business is what sets us apart, where we're going to try and pick apart everything, even if it means we, you can have a really great open rate, which I guess open rates don't even matter anymore, a really strong click rate, but maybe the revenue's not there.
mm,
Why? What's the why? Why are we not seeing the revenue? Did we drive them to the wrong link? Meaning, did we put them on a product page and we should have put them on a landing page? Should we put them on a collection page or the home page? Did we, what we said in the email, did we give that good experience when they landed on the website? Then we need to have a conversation with the client and say, hey, where we're seeing great clicks going to your website, we're not seeing the conversions. How come? Because it's very quick. A brand wants to say, oh, you're not driving enough revenue, which happens all the time. I'll push back where I think it's warranted and say, I disagree. Here's the reason why I disagree with you. And here's the data to support that thought. That's my whole thought process. And I think that's
mm.
what sets us apart from the million of agencies that continue to pop up every day and the ones that are out there.
How do you continue growing yourself as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a founder? Do you engage in networking? Do you engage with others? What's your style of personal development?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I would say when I was in house, I, put a lot of time, energy, and effort into Twitter back then and, got to meet a lot of great people. And then from there, I'd say more so I've been probably a little lacking in my networking. I'm really not a big proponent of going to events because nobody wants to speak to me. Once they find out I'm an agency, they're like, oh, we're going to get sold to and pitched to. It's funny. I was at the Klaviyo event yesterday where they launched a B2C CRM. And I'm sitting next to the guy and we're talking, and he says, oh, who are you with? And once I said it, like you saw his face drain because he was a brand. And I
Yeah.
said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to pitch you." And next thing you know, we started talking about. I'm a New York Jets fan, so I was talking about the Jets. He was talking about the Patriots, a team that he enjoyed, and we left as friends, and it's
Mm,
great. So I probably need to do a better job of getting out there, networking more, and just being more sociable.
mm, yeah, interesting. What I found is obviously we sell to agencies, but one of the most important devices that I feel have contributed to my growth from a sales perspective is to never sell.
Yep.
I think I've ingrained it into my DNA to never
Hmm.
sell, to never try to sell, and just like yourself, to qualify or operate in a buyer's mindset as a seller.
Hmm.
And very fascinating things happen when you do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting
Mm.
on how that works, right? It's the art of no selling.
Yeah.
And, I think because of being in house and, I think getting pitched to so often, I think I've been just put numb to being sold to. So I try to avoid it at all costs, which is, you know, there is an art form to not selling and also trying to make it seem like it's not a sell because people are picking up on that more and more.
Mm.
So it's a very, fine line that we need to straddle because obviously you want to say, hey, if you need help, by all means ask the questions, but then they feel like the second that they have a question, they're going to get roped in. So, it is a true balancing act.
Very true. Very much agreed. What is the vision and the future of AMB? Where do you see yourself, and what do you see the business in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years? Given the AI, all of the innovation that is happening in the in the tech space.
Yeah, I think by in 2 to 3 years from now, it's
Mm.
just going to be all about strategy more than anything else in the world. I think copy will come close enough. I think today it's 80% of the way there, the copy through whatever AI tool that you decide to use. So I still think it needs a very human element to not come across as AI. But then, I think design is what's going to be the interesting one to see how fast that can come. Right now, I don't see it. I don't see where design AI is coming for email because there's so many different nuances that to make a beautiful email, I'm not seeing it just yet, but do I think it'll be there in a year to two? Absolutely. Then it's going to come down to the strategy. So one of the things is, ChatGPT or Claude or all these things, it's only as good as the prompts that you're putting into it. So it's a
Mm.
lot of garbage in, garbage out, right? It's an old accounting saying. And, you got to be really smart, really thoughtful, really intelligent to get good strategy out of an AI tool. So I still think the strategic critical thinkers are going to win. And I think that's what is going to happen. So I do think eventually headcount will shrink at agencies because they'll become more and more reliant on the tools to make them work faster. But it's going to be more critical thinkers that I think will see that success in 3 to 5 years than anyone else. So, like these agencies that are popping up, saying, oh, I can give you 20 designs and for your campaigns for $2,000 a month. I think those people will get replaced very quickly.
Mm. Interesting. Very much agree on the critical side of things. Strategic mind, strategic thinking. We found that's also the case in the consulting space, where there are a lot of tools that are popping up that offer strategic reporting or AI reporting that aggregate and collect data and then try to kind of make sense of it. But even though data aggregation and data cleaning is very important, definitely there still needs to be a person who understands the problem contextually. And I think AI is a little bit, it's not there yet to be able to make these calls. Final question. What is your advice for aspiring agency owners?
For me, it's try not to just sign as many clients as possible. Yes, it's an important thing is if you're trying to do it on your own, but grow slowly. I once made the mistake of, I took one approach at one time. I was going to say, I was just going to grow at all costs, and it led to chaos where control was lost. And, someone said to me, you have to be okay with 80% being okay and 20% mistakes. And, one of the things that was taught to me really early on as an accountant was my boss said to me, it was the first week I was working there, and he said, what grades did you get in accounting? And I said, I got A's. And he said, great. What grade is that? He said, it's a 93, 94. He said, great. He said, if you make 7% mistakes here, you will get fired. And I said, wow, what a wake up moment to that. So grow slowly. Don't make 20% mistakes. Try to make, as few as you possibly can. Just grow slow, invest in yourself, continue to learn. Don't think you know everything. I continue to try and teach myself, learn, and make myself better every single day. I think that's really important as an agency owner to don't rest on your laurels and, just continue to make yourself better. It'll make your clients better and then you'll retain them longer.
Josh, it's been a insightful conversation. I feel like I've been mentored a little bit as well. Thank you very much for your time. It's been great.
Thank you so much for your time today.